everybody, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. You can find all my stuff at dailyevolver.com. I love hearing from you. You can write me at jeff@dailyevolver.com, or you can go to the website, click the Connect tab, and leave me a voicemail. And like I said, I love hearing from you, and I have been hearing from you. And that's what I'm going to respond to today, is that people are all a Twitter, literally, about the election, American politics here as we leave Nevada and head towards South Carolina. One of the advantages that I appreciate about integral consciousness is that being multi-perspectival and seeing the truth of all stages of human development and worldviews, at least as a practice. I mean, it's not something you do very well, but at least as a practice. It liberates us from having to have a solid opinion about things. We may notice that we do have a solid opinion, but one of the things that comes online at Integral is a witness or observer position where we can see our arising Jeffness, in my case, thoughts and feelings and body sensations and all of the stuff that make up our subjective reality. And we don't have to be hooked by it as much. This is a particularly great practice with politics, because politics is about, it's hitting lower chakras of power and control and how the world should be. And so there's a lot of juice there. And yet, despite the fact that I try to, listen to all points of view and even be influenced by the person I'm talking to, I still have to, as a good citizen, make a decision. And I am called upon now to make a decision in the next, 6 days. It's Wednesday, and next Tuesday is Super Tuesday, which is a big day in American elections. I live in Colorado, and we're one of the states that make up about a third of the voters that will be voting on Tuesday. And there's a lot that's going to be known after Tuesday. For one thing, it's the first time Mike Bloomberg is going to be on the ballot. So what I want to do is I want to walk through the 6 main candidates that are still in contention: Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, Mike Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders, and Pete Buttigieg. And I'm actually not sure what vote I'm going to cast. I have till Tuesday. I will say that I have ruled 3 out, I'm pretty sure, and 3 in. And so I'll start with the ones I've ruled out. And first among them, I guess, we'll talk about 7 candidates, is Trump. And, I've done plenty of commentary on Trump. I'm going to do more because I confess I have evolved on Trump. And it does feel like a confession, because it feels like a betrayal of some of my progressive friends and my own progressiveness. But Trump's easy for me to rule out because he's red, and he's operating from an egocentric stage of development. I think there's other stuff coming online and other stuff that is online, but he's red enough and egocentric enough that I don't want him to be in charge of the government and particularly the nuclear codes. So of the Democrats, I guess I'll start with my least favorite. And this is Elizabeth Warren. And, I wanted to like Elizabeth Warren. I didn't want to be a sexist. I didn't want to think she was a hectoring schoolmarm. I really challenged that, but I saw it arise in me. But after the 2 debates, I am actually repulsed by her. And, so I get to see that. And I think, why am I repulsed? And it's the same reason I'm repulsed by Trump, is that both of them exhibit red, which is this ungoverned impulse to slash and burn your opponent without regard to vetted facts. Now, Trump much more than Warren. For him, it's a lifestyle. But still, I saw it in her last night. And what I'm talking about particularly is her going after Bloomberg, claiming that, again, I don't know how many years or decades ago, but Bloomberg was talking to a young woman who was weighing her pregnancy and her career, and he suggested that one of her options was to kill it. He completely denies it. And so the moderator, being a good moderator, asked her, what proof do you have that Bloomberg said that? And her answer was her words. Now, that is literally chilling to the modern sensibility. And it was historically quite hard fought, that people can't be convicted through accusations, that there has to be proof. Otherwise, we're back in the witch burnings. And if that's the standard for ruining somebody's reputation and career, then no wonder the vast majority of Americans, and I'm talking about women, blacks, gays, everybody, vast majority, agree that political correctness has gone too far. I've often said political correctness, the speech and thought police of the green meme. There's a thought police in orange. There's a thought police in all stages of development. But this is the one at green. And when we think about moving forward into a new integration, integral is basically the integration of the best of previous stages, then this is what we want to leave behind. And there's a red impulse in all stages because the red's still there in the meme stack. Anyway, I know what she was doing. She was appealing to, other red-green people, for one thing. And mainly, I think she was trying to put a hole in the Bloomberg balloon. And at that, politics is a rough game. She did it. I felt it myself, particularly after his lousy response. And, I heard it in my liberal friends. A lot of my friends are and were more for Bloomberg simply because they calculate that he can beat Trump, but definitely set them back. And so Elizabeth, if that was what you were after, you did it. But I get to have my feelings. And right today, my feelings are, go away. And I think, to quote my dear departed mother, you make my ass tired. All right, so Elizabeth's out. Also, the fact that she came in third, fourth, and fourth in the first three primaries where she spent 3 years of her life campaigning. All right, number two that I think we can bid a provisional farewell to, at least as president, is Joe Biden. Consensus was he was better last night in the pre-South Carolina debate. I have seen him in a couple extended interviews where, he just doesn't feel like the future. It's just as simple as that. He adds up on paper in a certain way, like Jeb Bush did, or John Kerry or Dukakis, there's a whole line of them. But presidents lead us into the future, even if, like Trump, the future is the 1950s, recapitulated. But at least it's not the status quo. And Biden is just, exemplar for the status quo. Okay, the third one I'm ruling out is Amy Klobuchar. And, I've talked about her being, so I sort of get a subtle body contraction from her, that this default smile, and yet behind the scenes, she's a totalitarian with her staff and throws things and yells at them. And, it's off-brand. It's incoherent. I'm warming up. I got to say, I am warming up to her. I thought she was really pretty good last night. And, she's a woman pragmatist from the Midwest. I think she could be formidable against Trump. And I think she is almost perfect, and this may be what she's really after. She's a perfect VP candidate for whoever gets the presidential nod. And that brings me to something else I wanted to share before I get into the three candidates I'm ruling in and who I may vote for. There was an article in the New York Times this morning in the opinion section by Tom Friedman. He says, the Democrats have to do something extraordinary. Forge a national unity ticket, the likes of which they have never forged before. What would this super ticket look like? Well, and then he gets into, it's going to be Sanders or Bloomberg. It's going to be at the head of the ticket. And this theory of this super ticket works either way, with either of them at the top. And he lays it out this way, if he was whoever's at the top there. He says, I want people to know that if I am the Democratic nominee, these will be my cabinet choices, my team of rivals. I want Amy Klobuchar as my vice president. Her decency, experience, and moderation will be greatly appreciated across America, and particularly in the Midwest. I want Mike Bloomberg, or Bernie Sanders, depending on who's saying this, as my Secretary of the Treasury. Our plans for addressing income inequality are actually not that far apart. And if we can blend them together, it will be great for the country and reassure markets. Again, that's true on paper. I can't imagine Bernie Sanders picking Mike Bloomberg as Secretary of Treasury or vice versa. I'm not even sure that's a good idea. That's my weakest point in this article, but to go on. And here's one I like. I want Joe Biden as my Secretary of State. No one in our party knows the world better or has more credibility with our allies than Joe. And if you want an establishment guy, Secretary of State, that's good. He goes on, I will ask Elizabeth Warren to serve as Health and Human Services Secretary. No one could bring more energy and intellect to the task of expanding healthcare for more Americans than Senator Warren. Okay, fair enough. I want Kamala Harris for Attorney General. She has the toughness and integrity to clean up the corrupt mess Donald Trump has created in our Justice Department. I'm good with that. Next, I would like Mayor Pete as Homeland Security Secretary. His intelligence and military background would make him a quick study in that job. I'd like Tom Steyer to be a brand new cabinet position, Secretary of National Infrastructure. Cory Booker, the former mayor of Newark, who I love actually, to become Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, who would bring more passion to the task of revitalizing our inner cities than Cory. And then here's an interesting one. I am asking Mitt Romney to be my Commerce Secretary. He is the best person to promote American business and technology abroad, and it is vital that the public understands that my government will be representing all Americans, including Republicans. I'd like Andrew Yang to be Energy Secretary. And then here's a good one. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to serve as our UN ambassador. Can you imagine how our international standing would improve with youth worldwide with her representing next gen America? I love it. William McRaven, retired Navy Admiral for the Secretary of Defense. And then Friedman goes on to write, he says, if Bernie or Bloomberg or whoever emerges to head the Democratic ticket brings together such a team of rivals, I am confident it will defeat Trump in a landslide. I think so too, actually. But if progressives think they can win without the moderates, or the moderates without the progressives, they are crazy. And they'd be taking a huge risk with the future of the country by trying. And then he goes on to sort of bemoan the end of the parties. And that, Trump has turned the Republican Party into the Trump Party, and it's dead. And, that'll be true with the Democrats as well. If either Bernie or Bloomberg head up the ticket, Bernie's not a Democrat, and neither is Bloomberg, or at least wasn't for most of his career. So, the parties, things change. Did we really think the parties were going to be in charge in the way they have been forever? No. And then the world will continue to turn. And I think what's happening is, especially with this ascendancy of Bernie, that we are seeing, the continued polarization in a bad way. Polarization is always sort of ugly and rancorous and uncomfortable, but it's also fruitful. And it is a stage on the path of development. We have to really flesh out the whole field, not just the 40-yard lines, but the whole field, so that we can see what we've got. And until we do, as ugly as it is, we're not ready for a new integration. And normally that requires a war. I argue that in countries with a center of gravity of modernity and above, we can do it with a mere culture war. But nevertheless, that has to happen. And I think as integralists, we can be friendlier to the culture war. All right. So with that said, let me just share who I'm ruling in. I'll start with the choice of my heart, which is Pete Buttigieg. I did a podcast on him called Mayor Pete's X Factor. Could it be integral consciousness? And I think it is, actually. And last night on the debate, he talked about, imagine tuning in to the TV and seeing a president that actually lowers your blood pressure. And that's really true of him for me. I often describe it as just my subtle body relaxes. I recognize an integral flexibility of mind and a multi-perspectivalism and a friendliness to all, like Obama, also an integral character to me. And so I just vibe with that. The downside is, I don't know if he could beat Trump. I could see this swell, when it's Trump against Buttigieg, I could see the wave that would carry Buttigieg forward. But I also see what would be working against him. One is that he just turned 38. And I got to say, even from my perspective, I think that's too young. I do. I think that you could be really smart at 38. I think you could be really integral at 38 and younger. But there is something to be said for just the quantity of years and experience that, starts racking up after 38. So I don't know. But, for me, that's not in the plus column at all. And the gay thing, I think, of course, cuts both ways. The traditionalists who are, let's face it, they're repulsed by the idea of him kissing his husband in the, White House and more, God knows. Don't want to think about it. It's probably a little bit like the way we progressives don't want to think about Trump and Melania. And this is the traditionalists. Now, I don't think the Democrats are going to get them anyway, so, we factor that in. The postmodernists are, we want a gay. It's a positive. Fair enough. So it would go with the sort of movable middle that the modernists, and if you look at the evolution of attitudes about gay people, modernists are still in that don't ask, don't tell camp. They're kind of okay with knowing about it, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to see it. This is very much a moving target. I mean, culture has moved so fast on this. It's astonishing in my lifetime. But I don't know. I'm trying to factor that in. And so I do see these obstacles to Pete. But, damn, his ascendancy here, that he is a 38-year-old mayor of a city of 100,000 in the Midwest that nobody thinks about, really just demonstrates the cutting power of integral thinking. And that he has, just through the sheer power of his mind and his sensibility and his heart, it's an X factor that I think really is exciting and bodes well for humanity as integral consciousness continues to come online. Anyway, Pete, I may vote for you because I want to put another, tick up on the integral column. But in my heart, I think we'd all be better off with, provided we survive this long, to welcome in the Buttigieg administration maybe in 2032 or something. We'll see. Next is Bloomberg. Again, he looks good on paper. He's the moderate. What Bloomberg would bring would be the reasonable middle, the people who just want the world to be managed well, the modernists, basically. They want the trains to run on time. A mayor of a big city is just uniquely qualified to run things. And apparently he did that very well. And I could sort of see some personality flaws. And I wish he would be, in a way, as candid about them as Trump is, and just respond to Elizabeth Warren and the progressive critics with something like, I'm an old guy. I'm growing like America. I came of age before feminism, through feminism. I've said and thought things, I've told jokes that I cringe at now. And, Trump and his crowd and our political enemies will try to use that against me. It's the cause of endless spin. And it's not just the Republicans and the political enemies, it's the whole media machine. Everybody loves the sensationalism of it. I don't want to add grist to the mill. And if you want 4 more years of Trump, then stick with this line of questioning, because that's how you get 4 more years of Trump. So I don't know, something like that. The one question that I also cringed with him at is, and this was the last debate actually, where the questioner asked him, "You're worth $64 billion. Okay, actually, that is, just to put it in context, as much as the bottom 150 million Americans. So she says, "You're worth $64 billion. Did you earn that?" And his answer was yes. And, again, legally true, but it really is, becomes more and more of a moral dilemma to see that kind of wealth concentrated in one person's hands. And so to sort of continue that answer with something like, it's hard to say that one person earns that kind of a fortune that's come my way. But, I work hard. I think I'm a talented guy, but please, I hit the jackpot. I was at the right place at the right time. I was able to ride the horse. I was able to manage it. And what a great country, and what a great system that can, spin off, create that much wealth. And, I hope to bring that kind of luck to running the country. In some ways, I'm sorry that Bloomberg got in the debates, because he's not a good debater and he hasn't been doing it long. And I think people have been too obsequious to him for most of his life. But when I think about my friends who are small business owners and, part of the money elites, they're not billionaires by any means, but they're going to have a hard time voting for Bernie. And I've had a couple friends say, if it's Bernie and Trump, I'm voting for Trump. And these are people who hate Trump, but they love their money. And so Trump is considering the peace and prosperity that we're living in. He is historically low in terms of his approval and high in disapproval. The solid majority of people are somewhere between embarrassed and outraged by Trump. He's vulnerable just because you don't want to see him anymore. But, and I think Mike could do that. So, we'll see in the next 5 days if anything wants to pull my vote his way, but I'm open to it. He's still ruled in. All right. So that leads us to Bernie Sanders, also ruled in, the 6th of the 6th I'm going to talk about. And again, I think that Bernie represents the propulsive force of evolution arising on the left, just as Trump did on the right. It's one of the sort of axioms of human beings that will choose anxiety over depression if we have a choice. We don't just want to stick with the status quo. That's just not built into our genes. It's not the procreate urge of the cosmos is always wanting to challenge the status quo. And what Trump did was he countered modernity, globalism, and post-modernity, which is multiculturalism. And that is a fruitful challenge. And I think we'll be better off for it, even, again, as ugly as it is. But that almost wants, in terms of the laws of polarity and just the energetics of the cosmos, it wants to swing to the left and counter the status quo from the left. And people don't want, if you think of young people who are working the gig economy and maybe they have 2 jobs and 3 jobs and they're insecure in terms of their health care and sort of safety net, and they're a little confused. And, that's, a lot of people are in that situation. I maintain that is better than being like my dad and my uncles and aunts, particularly my uncles, working for one company for 40 years, and that's all you did. But it has there's a stressful piece of it that they don't want to manage their way into the future. They want to change it. And that is fruitful. There's another kind of sort of draining the swamp from the left that wants to happen. And that is just the end of the corruption of money and influence peddling and senators spending half their time fundraising. I just find that to be a repulsive idea. And I think Trump is vulnerable. There's no question that Trump is vulnerable to that kind of counter from the left. And I could absolutely see the wave rising that would take Bernie to the presidency. I think Bernie would get a lot of Trump voters. I think, a lot of Trump voters are just angry at the whole situation, and the critique of the moneyed class, they're very, very receptive to. And Trump can't really carry that. Now, Bernie is an old style liberal, an old style socialist, actually. And, he's gotten into trouble here over the last couple of days for, as Pete put it, looking on the bright side of the Castro regime. I don't know if it's a problem. It's probably about as much of a problem as it was for Trump to say that he thought Putin was a strong leader and McCain was not a war hero because he got caught. So, I think this, again, what it ultimately signifies is I'm not for the status quo here. I'm blowing up our thinking. And there is a sort of a mindset in progressive thinking, particularly this old-time socialist thing, that history is just an endless battle between the oppressor and the oppressed. And, there's an argument for that. And, there's an argument that that's still true. And you can sort of get sympathetic with this, the arising of the peasants at the 20th century. And in many cases, their hearts were in the right place in terms of education and healthcare and so forth. But from an integral perspective, we can see that if their center of gravity is pre-modern, then they're doomed, because it's modernity that brings this miracle to humanity where we're going to have rule of law, not rule of the dictator. And until that, you get authoritarianism and totalitarianism, whether at the hands of the czar or the colonialists or the peasants. And so if you don't have a evolutionary view, or at least a clear evolutionary view, most people have a de facto one, even though they'll never admit it. It's the strangest thing. But anyway, if you have this view that it's just, back and forth, the oppressor and the oppressed, then, it gets confusing as to what socialism even means. Is it Chavez? Is it Ortega? Is it the Ayatollah? Is it the Bolsheviks? Was it good until Stalin came along? As my friend Bob said the other night, the Bolsheviks weren't that bad until Stalin came along. Lenin didn't kill that many people. It's true. And I think there's actually some benefit in looking at that and seeing that where the hearts are in the right place. But it's very different than socialism today and what we might see in Scandinavia or any place where we're actually headed. And it's inevitable. This is where, the Bernie thing is, there has a certain inevitability to it, whether it's Bernie or not, that this, more green economy, more egalitarian, sustainable economy. The modern economy is about winners and losers. It's about growth. Sustainability is what's called for at Green, and we're going to move there one way or the other. So, it might be Bernie because he's running a great campaign. And that what he's saying, he believes because he hasn't changed it in 30 years. So, he's raising money like a good capitalist, only not from billionaires. There's something to be said for that. He doesn't owe anybody anything. He's good with organization. And I may jump on the Bernie train. I may feel the burn. I am feeling the burn. But I still fear that, can he bring out the new voter? Because he's definitely going to turn off a lot of the people who put their money first, and they're actually deeply invested in the current system. And that may, it could be an ignominious defeat. I mean, we don't know. I don't know, nor does anybody else. But this is what we're engaged in. And I wanted to share, I thought one of my listeners, Justin McSherry, really had a good integral analysis of Bernie. He started out not as a Bernie supporter and has, as he said, he's feeling the burn. And I'll actually read from, so he writes, he says, "Who do you think will win the Democratic nomination? I was a Hillary supporter last time around because, well, Bernie just seemed unelectable. Not that he didn't inspire me with his message, nor was it because he wasn't genuine in his message, and not that he didn't convince me he was fighting for the right things. It was all just a little bit much, and he started to become a sort of caricature of the far left. And frankly, in 2016, a quote, socialist candidate didn't seem likely to win after 8 years of Obama pushing the culture to the left. The right was energized like never before to MAGA, Make America Great Again." He goes on, he says, "I don't know, but I think I'm feeling the burn this time around and starting to feel genuinely excited about it. I will say that I am indeed chafed by the nature of Bernie's black and white thinking. Capitalism is bad, Medicare for all or nothing. His critics are right in this regard, and it's very much a green worldview that is lacking in the nuanced polarity thinking espoused by Steve McIntosh that our political discourse so desperately needs." And he was referring to Steve's new book, Developmental Politics, How America Can Grow into a Better Version of Itself, which I think is a terrific integral analysis and map of the way forward. I did a podcast with him called A New Politics of Culture with Steve McIntosh a couple weeks ago. It's on the Daily Evolver site. So he's referring to that. And then Justin goes on to write, he says, "At the same time, I believe integral thinking is ahead of its time, right where it needs to be at the cutting edge. But the center of gravity of this great nation has some growing to do before it's ready. And I think the growing will be catalyzed by a period of upheaval and crisis seen only once in a generation. Looking at the Strauss-Howe generational theory, we're smack dab in the middle of a fourth turning." And I did a podcast on this, maybe a couple years ago now, called the Bannon Doctrine. And it's about this idea of generational change. And it's, another fascinating pattern that you can lay on history that makes a lot of sense. But we're in a fourth turning, and here's how they describe it. And this is what Justin says. He's quoting them and saying, "The fourth turning is the era in which America's institutional life is torn down and rebuilt from the ground up, always in response to a perceived threat to the nation's very survival. Civic authority revives, Cultural expression finds a community purpose. And people begin to locate themselves as members of a larger group. In every instance, fourth turnings have eventually become new founding moments in American history, refreshing and redefining the national identity. And I think that's true. It's what I was talking about, that this polarization, that we're shining the light, widening the lens to see this so that we're not stuck in the suffocating center. You know, it's not a homogenized center. This is just a bigger field that we want to integrate. And Justin says it very well. He says, this crisis, I believe, hinges on a revolution that will stabilize the middle class, integrate a population of poor Southern and Midwestern Trump supporters who are desperately trying to make it into the middle class. And in short, this crisis is about the future of capitalism itself. And it's abundantly clear that Bernie is tapping into a deep sentiment across America, that it's time to question our institutions, hold our leaders accountable, and let this moment smash into the financial system like a particle accelerator smashes atoms. That's just what my money friends are afraid of, but okay, I get it. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Bernie is tapping into the moral lines of development and sending a message without compromise. Does a spiritual sage advocate for compromise when teaching the path to enlightenment? Hell no. When the next recession hits, you can bet Bernie will have a tidal wave of support that just may spark a revolution. And even though I resonate with Mayor Pete, and I agree with you that his message of unification and hope sounds the most integral of all, he reminds me of Obama in this regard, and he inspires me in the same way. Unification is not what is needed yet. Unification will come after the crisis, when it's time to rebuild our institutions for the next generation. I'm all for Buttigieg 2028. I was saying 2032, but okay. But right now is not a time for compromise. Now is the time for a revolution. And God, I love getting great integral thinking from my listeners like that. And thank you, Justin. Yeah, so, you know, I don't think people who ultimately vote for Bernie, if he's the one, aren't going to do it because they think he's going to implement his policies. He's going to be working in a system of checks and balances. And, you know, I don't think we need to think that we're going to get Medicare for all any more than we needed to think that Donald Trump was going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. But it shows where your heart is. You can turn the ship of state a few degrees, and it's very, very significant and consequential down the road. So we'll see. But, you know, welcome to the culture wars. I think we got more polarization to come. But as an integralist, I am, you know, like I said, friendlier to that idea. I see my role as helping to, you know, being the universal donor, as Claire Graves described integral consciousness, the one who can be friends with all of it. And in so doing, sort of the natural integration that's next just comes online. Hallelujah, right? Okay, I think that'll do it for today, and stay tuned, and maybe I'll let you know who I voted for, but you know, I have to figure it out first myself. Okay, thanks everybody for listening to the Daily Evolver. Check back, and we'll see you next time.